We are joined, I know our time is limited, with Evan Drellich, the writer for the baseball writer for The Athletic, one of the chief baseball writers. Evan, I really appreciate you joining us. You're also the author of that book called Winning Fixes Everything, about the Houston Astros and their victories and what they did to, to get to that point. How are you?
I'm doing good, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right. We'll get right to it. I wanted to talk about this. We're going to talk about the CBA, but I wanted to talk about this article you wrote, Fearing Olympics Participation Issues, MLB proposing stiff penalties for players who skip out. Is their ability to issue stiff penalties, would that be part of a new basic agreement, or do they have the right now in players' contracts to issue stiff fines for just not going wherever MLB tells them they got to go?
No, they do not have that right at this point. So this is all part of a negotiation. And to this point, it's probably better to consider it a separate negotiation.
Yeah.
Yes, MLB and the Players Union have started working on the next CBA. This is kind of a parallel negotiation. The timing of it could end up being that it gets kind of folded in, but it's kind of a parallel track. So even while they're figuring out all the other issues, they're working on, okay, what are the terms of player participation in the Olympics? And it's not just MLB and the union having this conversation. LA 28, which is the organizer of the Olympics, the Olympic Games in LA in 2028, they're in it. The IOC, the International Olympic Committee, they're part of it. To some degree, the WBSC, the World Baseball Softball Confederation, which oversees all the international bodies, they're a part of it. But it's really kind of this three-way negotiation where it's not only working out things like, is it going to be mandatory? They got to work out, hotels and tickets. And there's just a lot of different components of if baseball players are going to play in these 28 Olympics, which everybody ultimately thinks will happen. What does it look like? How are they paid? Where do they stay? And is it indeed mandatory? And so to the question about what could MLB do right now, they can't make it mandatory. This has to be negotiated. And my expectation would be that the ultimate agreement that they reach probably doesn't look like what was first proposed. It's like what we see with the regular CBA negotiations. People make their initial proposals, and then over time, they're going to whittle it down to something that everybody could find acceptable.
Before we get into the CBA, I had one more question about this. Do you get this sense that players are excited about the Olympics having baseball? It seems like
Absolutely.
it seems like a tremendous interruption to a regular season.
I think, look, you could probably find a player in any circumstance who's going to have any wide range of perspective, right? I'm sure there's somebody who's looking at it and going, I don't want to do this in the middle of the season. But I think overall, guys realize, well, this is a cool, unique, special thing. It'd be good for the game to be able to have all the big leaguers in the Olympics, which has never happened before.
Yeah.
This is a novel thing to have major league players potentially be able to go to the Olympics. So the general consensus for everybody on the owner side and the player side is this is a good thing. The players don't love the idea that if you choose not to go, there is a stiff penalty that the league is proposing. And again, we'll see if that actually makes it into the final agreement that they presumably will make.
Luke, why don't you lead off with the CBA?
So, Evan, the first thing that came to mind when I saw that the schedule was released yesterday was, boy, that's an early start. And boy, that's an early end to the season. And part of me thought that also makes it easy to push two series back to the end of the year if labor negotiations linger, as they probably will, as they did the last negotiation. Is there anything to that? Am I being too cynical?
No, I don't think you're being too cynical. History tells us, if you look at the last lockout, if you remember, they entered March on March 1st, 2022. They did not have a deal. And the commissioner, Rob Manfred, canceled the first two series of the season. And the implication at that time was these games are gone. They're not going to be rescheduled. Lo and behold, they reach a deal 9 days later. and they were able to still find a way to play a full 162. They just revised the schedule. So if that scenario comes to pass again, where kind of down to the wire, but they find a way to make a deal pretty close to the start of the season, you still have a shortened spring training. Yeah, I think the way that MLB constructed the schedule for 27, excuse me, sets up that possibility. The larger question is, are they even going to be close to a deal at that point? There's certainly a possibility that the negotiation is not far enough along, that the owners are still saying we want a salary cap, the players are still saying we don't want a salary cap, and then you're missing, who knows? Is it a month? Is it a couple weeks? Is it multiple months? I think one of the lessons of last time for me is everybody likes to find a way to play. Everybody likes to make money. The way you make money is you play the most games possible. And so I think there is a real chance that we do have a full or close to full 2027 season here. But yeah, where your mind went was exactly where my mind went with the early start to next year, which, by the way, the schedule for next year isn't that different than this year. Opening day it's basically a day earlier than it was this year. And it was already the earliest it had ever been this year. And they've got to accommodate the expanded postseason in the last few years. So it's not totally different than what we've seen in the past. But yeah, if they're getting close to a deal in late February, early March, I think you could see that schedule push back a little bit.
Evan, I'm already he's out of my mind. The guy who was fired from or resigned as the head of the Players Association. What was his name?
Tony Clark.
Tony Clark. He's been out of mind for me. Is Bruce Meyer, who's listed in your article as the head of the Players Association, has he been ratified as the head of the Players Association now, or is he the acting executive director or head of
he should. I typically, and it's possible I've forgotten one story, he's the interim head. The technical title for him is interim head. So the players have ratified him in that position, but in terms of a long-term stay,
right,
that'll get worked out down the road if he wants to stay and if they want him to stay.
So Meyer will be the one that's most likely directing this the whole way through, correct?
Yeah. So Bruce Meyer, even prior to Tony Clark's departure, was the lead negotiator for the players.
Okay.
So that he was leading that piece of it, and now he is in charge of the entire organization. But there's another top lawyer at the union as well, a guy named Matt Nussbaum, who's handling a lot of the day-to-day duties that Tony was handling. And so Bruce Meyer's at the top, but there's kind of a 1A figure in Matt Nussbaum.
Now, is Meyer supposed to be a real hard ass when it comes to negotiations, much more so than Tony Clark?
Tony Clark, his first negotiation did not give him a great reputation as far as a negotiator. The deal that the players struck in 2016 for the 2017-2021 CBA was not a particularly good deal for players. Tony was at the table more for that one. And so, Bruce Meyer was brought in to be a tough negotiator, and he has certainly been that.
Yeah.
And the owners, by the way, have a very tough negotiator in Dan Halem, who reports to the former top negotiator for the league, Rob Manfred, the commissioner.
Okay. Luke?
Evan, do the owners really want a hard salary cap, or is this more of a way to get what NBA owners have with the second apron, which is basically a cap without a cap?
I think they would love nothing more than to have a true hard salary cap. Whether they would ultimately end up being happy with greater restrictions on the current system without the formal hard cap, I don't think that's unreasonable to speculate that if the owners were to pivot off of a cap, that they'd say, okay, well, we don't need a cap, but we need, tighter CBT or tighter penalties, something that, achieves some of their spending limitation goals. But this is what they always want, right? In a way, this is a very old line of discussion. The management side has always wanted greater restrictions on spending. The player side always says, no, we want you to be able to spend as much as possible on our players. So everybody in a way is just kind of playing their role here.
Hey, Evan, can you give me some hope here? Like, it feels like there's a lot of the proposals we've heard from both sides have been very far apart.
We're all fantasy baseball players. We want hope.
That's
Evan.
right. So why should we be optimistic that there will be a deal done and we get a full season that starts on time next year?
I think when most people look at the state of the sport today, they feel like it's pretty good. You know, even Rob Manfred stands up there talking to the Baseball Writers Association of America reporters before the All-Star game, says, you know, attendance is up, ratings are up, you know, things are feeling pretty good. And when things are not terrible, it's harder to imagine everybody standing around going, it is worth billions in lost revenue that would come over a very lengthy work stoppage. The tricky part of this is that franchise values would go up in a notable way if owners got a salary cap. And baseball franchise values, well, I think for most people would still be considered quite healthy. It's not like they're not growing. It's not like they're not in the billions. They're not what they are in the NBA and the NFL. And so if the owners all get together and find this cohesion to say, you know what, it's worth some short-term pain to really make this thing more valuable, that's kind of the wild card here. But MLB has to negotiate new national TV deals starting for 2029, which means, you know, that's a negotiation you're going to do 2028, maybe even have talks start sooner than that. If you miss a year, if you miss a really long time in 27, it's not just short-term damage. It could really be kind of over multiple years. You push fans away, people would be unhappy. So I think the incentives to have a really long work stoppage at this point, I don't really see them. But again, it might just depend on how owners look at that long-term question of, well, this would do a lot for our franchise values.
Cool. Would they be able to earn the trust back of fans, you think, if they were, you know, if worst case scenario, we miss an entire season? Like,
one of the beauties of this business for owners is fandom and like literally the loyalty people, the public, consumers have for the product. And that's something that they might be able to kind of find comfort in and say, well, these guys will come back. You know, they'll say they'll stay away for a little bit, but nobody really knows what the effect would be. There was an ugly stoppage in 94, 95, 232 days for that strike, took down a World Series. And, you know, that strike started in August. It was at the end of the year. You know, if you miss a month or two of April or May and then play a season and have a World Series, is the damage the same? But the entertainment environment is different now. You know, you on your phone have unlimited options for alternative entertainment. You can go watch Netflix, you can go watch Peacock, whatever you want. And I think for baseball to disappear in this entertainment environment, even for a bit of time, is a big risk. And I think everybody has some cognizance of that. So, you know, would fans come back? Some fans will say, I'm never coming back. And then 2 months later, they'll be back. Some fans will say, I'm never coming back. And, you know, they might actually stay away. And it's just very hard to predict how much the damage would be. The one thing that's true, it's got to be proportional to an extent to how much time you miss.
Yeah.
You know, if you miss a month, it's different than shutting down the sport for a year and canceling a World Series.
Evan, we've watched enough negotiations to know that at some point there's a pivot point. What are some of the other issues that MLB is interested in if they back off of the cap and collapse and say, all right, I'll tell you what, we'll back off the hard cap, but we want these working conditions? Are there other issues that you're cognizant of?
Well, I mean, you can even see a little bit of it in what's come up so far. For example, the international draft is something that MLB has wanted for a long time. And last time around 5 years ago, the players actually for the first time showed interest in the concept. They couldn't agree on the money. But you could do an international draft without a salary cap. You could potentially do major changes to revenue sharing, the way the teams share money between themselves, without a cap. A very important question here is how much could you do? So in this cap proposal, the league is saying we're going to newly share local TV money equally, meaning the Yankees, the Dodgers are all willing to put their huge local money into one pot and everybody shares it. My guess is They're not going to be willing to do that unless they get the benefits of the salary cap. But what could you do? You know, are there things that could be done in revenue sharing without a cap? And it's very hard to know exactly how far the owners would be willing to go outside of a cap system, because for now, they're not going to stand there and say, well, here's what we're willing to do with something other than what we're telling you we want.
Yeah.
And so that's, you know, if we get to that point, it's really a next year conversation.
Luke's got one last one. We'll let you get out of here. Thank you, Evan.
Evan, who are the alphas among the owners who really drive this discussion? Because we always hear about the alphas among the MLBPA who drive the discussion. I never hear about the owners. Who are the alphas?
It used to be Reinsdorf, but he's kind of aging out.
Well, but he's still there.
Yeah.
It's actually a really good question, and I'm going to take a rain check on it for this reason. We have new figures here, right? We got Steve Cohen involved, David Rubenstein involved. We get, you know, it's not the same collection of people that it's been in the past, and yet you still have Dick Monfort of the Rockies, who's the head of the labor committee. You know, Hal Steinbrenner and the Yankees are always going to be influential. The Red Sox and John Henry are always going to be influential. The Ricketts with the Cubs. You know, the big markets still have the power, but you have a group of owners, Ken Kendrick with the Diamondbacks, Artie Moreno with the, I guess I'm not taking a rain check, with the Angels, who over time have been kind of the smaller market hawks, although the Angels wouldn't be considered a smaller market, but who have been, you know, I think a particularly hard group. There's a group of owners who've been hard for Rob Manfred to corral. Bob Castellini, the Castellini family in Cincinnati. And the tricky thing here is Manfred, by the MLB Constitution, needs 75% of owners to ratify a new CBA. That's 23 votes. So what that means is if you have a group of 8 owners who are standing there and saying, we need a cap, and you got another 22 saying, let's just play some baseball.
Yeah.
You're kind of stuck. You got to flip one of those owners. And so a small group of owners, or relatively small group of owners, can have kind of an outsized influence on the whole thing. And I think there's some argument here that, you know, one of the things Rob's got to do is make all of his owners happy to the extent he can. And I think there is power in saying, guys, look, I tried to get a cap. If they get to that point, if the players stay firm, which we're assuming they will, but who knows? You know, it might be a feather in Rob's cap deal. Say, look, guys, I tried here.
Yeah.
You know, I tried to deliver what you want. I couldn't quite do it. So, you know, but who exactly ends up being the powerhouses? To some degree, we got to see what happens here. But, you know, Jerry's still kicking, man.
No question. But there's one thing, you know, Rob is not planning to continue as commissioner beyond this. So he's not doing it to gain votes, so to speak.
Well,
at least that's what he says.
That's right. And this is, and there's no reason to not take him at his word, except there was the history with his predecessor, Bud Selig, where he said multiple times, I'm going to leave. Now he wants to come back. Right. There's Rob Manfred knows how to create leverage. And there's an argument that, you know, if he wants to stay, he's creating a little leverage for himself. And if certainly the outcome of this CBA would be a big factor on whether the owners would say, Rob, please come back. And, you know, maybe at that point he says, no, I really do just want to be on the golf course and with my grandkids. But what actually will happen there, nobody really knows except Rob Manfred.
All right. We promised to get you out at 11:55. I think we did it. Can we get you on in a couple months again?
Anytime, guys. Let me know.
Right. Thank you, Evan. Really appreciate it. Evan Drellich, baseball writer extraordinaire for The Athletic.